website. So tempe.gov/neighborhood grants is going to be a great resource for you. And you can go back and see all of those, and it gives you more of an in-depth look at the various mandatory requirements by the project type. I do want to introduce our staff really quick that have joined us today. We have from Neighborhood Services, Elizabeth Thomas and Brenda Clark. And then from our Parks Division, we have Dave McClure, who is going to be your main contact for all of your park projects. And so he's on as well, and he's going to be speaking in a little bit as far as some of his requirements. So our neighborhood grant program, just for those of you who maybe this is your first time applying or aren't familiar with our program, the mayor and council do set aside funds for community initiated projects. So this is really that opportunity for you to come together, figure out as a neighborhood, what is it that you need? Is there something that you guys want to see happen? And then this gives you that opportunity to have funding to make those improvements. And since 1994, you can see the map there shows you where all of the projects have been completed. You're eligible to apply every year. It is a competitive process, but we encourage you to do so. And you can see that over 4.8 million now has been invested. The city does work on a fiscal year of July to June, so we're always a little bit ahead of when the budget is actually adopted. So we say that the funding is anticipated to be available because until mayor and council adopts it, nothing is finalized. So this year we're looking at 350,000 that would be available. And then for water conservation projects, they do put in a little bit extra funds for those projects meeting certain criteria. And then also new this cycle is we're increasing the grant amount to 20,000. Now we do require a match of at least 25% for all of our homeowner associations and our certified crime-free multi-housing communities. Our voluntary neighborhood associations do not have to match. And so this map here, similar to the previous one, shows you where our registered neighborhood and homeowner associations are. And these are the ones, they're spread out with the city. The orange are voluntary groups and the blue are HOAs. So what can you use the funds for? Biggest thing again is that it does benefit the entire neighborhood instead of just individual property owners. Capital project, and you do have just that 1 year to complete the project. And so as far as that goes, it just builds the project. It doesn't give you the money for any kind of maintenance or operating costs. So you want to make sure that you figure that out. And then as far as our homeowner associations and our multifamily properties go, the funds cannot be used for any kind of basic maintenance projects. It does have to be used for some type of enhancement. So who do I involve? And you'll see this repeated many times throughout our presentation. But the grants are supposed to be community initiated. So that means that you've talked to your neighbors. They know that the grant program exists and they get to kind of have input into what you might want to apply for. They can comment on the project ideas. There's many projects that even lend themselves to hands-on type of projects. And the one thing we would say is obviously right now there's not a lot of in-person meeting going on. So we don't want that to deter you from still applying for a grant. At Neighborhood Services, we're happy to help you figure out the best way to get input from your community. We can help host online surveys. We can get help you with notices to your community members. So that shouldn't be a barrier. There's some different creative ways that some of our neighbors have been talking to each other. So reach out and we're happy to share those with you to see kind of what might work best for your community. Because we do still want you to talk to your neighbors in figuring out what kind of grant project you want to do. As far as the formalities of what you submit, is there is an online application form, and that's going to be kind of more your basics, contact information, project address, project type. And then depending on your project, you will have different mandatory requirements. All of that information is on our website, or you can reach out to us and we're happy to get it to you if you need a hard copy mailed to you. But it really is going to depend on what you're submitting your grant for. That influences the number of bids, but for all of them, you should have some before and after pictures. It depends what kind of plans you have to submit, depending on the project type. But then again, for all of them is that proof of community involvement. And then how are the grants evaluated? So there is a group of city staff that is going to review all those applications. The decisions are made based on what you submit. So that's another reason we emphasize that they really need to be complete and have everything there that we would need to answer any questions that might come up. But clear and detailed, did you engage the neighborhood? Can you complete the project? How are you going to maintain it if it requires it? And then most importantly is that impact. We have hosted a session just straight on, solely on environmental benefits. So I encourage you to go back and take a look at it. Is it helping with energy conservation? Does it advance some of our climate action plan goals? Is it, again, enhancing aesthetics, health and safety, addressing a known neighborhood deficiency? Does it complement other projects? Some of the examples we're going to show you in our city parks is the city is making investment in our city parks, fixing them up. So you'll see a lot of our associations have taken advantage of, that little extra thing that they want in their park. They can use the grant program to do that. And then that helps with what the city is already investing in that area. Oops, wrong way. You are able to coordinate efforts with other associations. So some of our parks especially are kind of that shared community space. So for our voluntary neighborhood associations and HOAs, you each are eligible for $20,000. So as we go through the projects, you'll see some are small scale, maybe only cost, I think one of them is only $600, you'll see, and then others can be much larger. And those larger projects were accomplished because they coordinated with other associations. They were by no means a $20,000 project or even 15 or 10 or whatever the amount was you could apply for at the time that the grant was awarded. So our parks especially have shown us opportunities where these joint applications happen. And now Dave with our Parks Division is going to introduce himself and talk a little bit more kind of about how they approach some of our park projects and investing in those.
Hello, everyone. As Shauna mentioned, I'm Dave McClure, the landscape architect with Parks, and I've been involved with Parks grant projects since 2013. So to start off with, it's always a good idea to have several ideas for your Parks grant projects. That way, when we meet or discuss them, we can evaluate each one, and also gives your neighbors options too to select from when you have your meeting, as Shauna had mentioned. And Shauna will go over many past grant projects that also have been completed over the years. Some items that we'd like to see with the project ideas are an aerial view of where the project would take place in the park, of the proposed amenity, and some site pictures are also helpful. Some projects may require professional services, but most of that would be done after the grant was approved. I also tend to meet people in the parks to go over each project, meeting with the applicants to look at the area to make sure there are no conflicts, and also to determine if any additional site work is required, such as grading, irrigation adjustments, and in some cases, additional lighting may be required for such projects such as shade structures and sidewalks. Also, all projects will need to meet the current ADA standards. And to look at the slide itself, some simple projects, such things as picnic tables and seating, which would be benches, dog waste stations, trash receptacles, trees, which would go through myself and also our urban forester, Richard Atkins. Some more complex projects are things like playground equipment, which typically has to be like for like. Shade structures, as mentioned, again, may or may not need lighting, and that's kind of has to possibly be submitted to development services to check if lighting is needed for that. And if lighting is needed, then additional professional services would be needed. And then skate park elements, and then some non-eligible things such as bathrooms and dog parks. With that, I'll turn it back over to Shauna to go over some of the past projects that have been completed in the parks over the years.
Thanks, Dave. And as I had previously mentioned, Council has been investing in our parks, so we link back to it from our one-page sheet on parks on our grant website. But if you can also go to tempe.gov/park updates, and you'll see the picture you see on the right there. It has a list by park and what's upcoming. So something else that Dave, and then we've also been joined by Erin Kirkpatrick in Parks over. She's also on the capital improvement side. But they'll make sure that you know, if you're asking for new swings, for example, and your playground scheduled to be redone in the next year, that's probably not going to work out because you're going to get new swings with that. So then you might look for something else, or let's say I don't know that any of our parks are 10 years off, but if you can go through a life cycle of an element, then that's something that they consider. Or if it's something that can be moved or reused, that's all something that they talk you through and make sure. But that gives you a list of all the scheduled park improvements that are coming to your park. So just some examples of past projects. And again, these are just examples. So don't feel you have to fit into one of these boxes. If you have an idea for your park, then schedule that meeting with Dave and he can come out and talk to you and see if it's something that they can make happen. So here's a picture. If you feel like your park needs another dogway station, for example, that's something that one of our neighborhoods did. Also, drinking fountain, depending on how many you might have there. Waste cans again, and those can look very different depending on your park and the style of the park. Here are some examples of seating elements. So again, benches. Dave mentioned that they do all have to be accessible. So you can your project has to be a one-time expenditure, but they can certainly build on each other. So you'll see some of our neighborhoods, because concrete can be expensive, and if they don't have a path yet, sometimes it does take the full amount just to get a path. And then the next year they may put in benches along the path or whatever it may be. But it does have to be accessible. And so that's where you'll see the amenities here. The bench is sitting on a concrete pad. They have an accessible path to them and then a spot next to them there. But in this case, for example, at Joyce Park, in addition to the little pad for the bench, they also did the trash can next to it. Other park, so Indian Bend Park, you can see where they just did the compliant walkway to get to their spot. Basketball, if your backboard and net are looking bad, they can do those. Grills or some of the different amenities. Some other creative ones that are just starting to pop up in our parks are fitness stations. So that one's at Escalante Park. And then they also used a grant for soccer goals. Chess tables, kind of a different thing that you might not see in every park, but certainly can be put in. And you have two examples. Stroud Park, that is, Dave works with you and shows you, okay, here's the city vendors and here's what they can put in. And so that's an example of the vendor provided one, where Mitchell wanted a more custom one. So in that case, they used a vendor that could actually build and create one out of concrete for them. Trees are a great amenity to add to our parks, and that's where both Dave and Richard Adkins, our urban forester, will work with you to make sure it's the right kind of tree. We have many different parks. Hallman Park there is more of our desert preserves type park. So you'll see that a tree that might go there might be different than like Meyer Park, for example, which will have some flood irrigation. So they'll make sure that the tree gets in the right place and it's the right type of tree as well. Here's another example of some more trees. Optimist Park, off McClintock and Guadalupe. Daley Park, actually along College, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but they planted peach trees, for example, so edible fruit, which provides other benefits as well as the shade. Picnic projects, as I mentioned, they're community gathering spaces. So you are going to have, there's spots where people want to get together, or they want to hang out when we can get in person safely, or you can see Cole Park spread them out. So maybe you guys can still meet there and be able to sit kind of across from each other and have some space. But these are just examples of where they wanted kind of more of a larger picnic area than maybe the single one that's provided in a park might provide. Bike racks, you can look at how you're getting to a park. So Stroud Park there put in, again, the concrete pad that it sits on, and then the bike racks itself. Clark Park got creative and had an artist design the bike racks to add a fun element to them. Shade in your park, again, Clark Park, it's the same artist there that did shade in the garden that's already at the park. And so in that way, the shade was, you can see, looks a little different because that is artist design, but very creative and adds a fun element to the park. In Goodwin Park, the shade is over actual playground equipment. And in Scudder Park, again, this is one where they got a brand new park, but so it included shade over the play equipment, but not over the picnic area. So they actually applied for a grant and got the cantilever shades there that shades their gathering area. And then, like I said, you don't have to fit in one of these boxes. You can get creative. Hudson Park did kind of more of a meditation maze there. At Mitchell, they had an old concrete pad that lent itself perfectly to some skate elements, just very simple ones. It's, not necessarily a skate park that we might install, but you can still see skateboarders out there using it. And then depending on what's in your park, Daley Park, for example, is a flood irrigated park. So they had the big irrigation standpipe. So they added public art within the park. And so certainly other parks will have lend themselves to some of what that could happen. And then here we're in Sella Park, and they have a pond in theirs. And so they did some floating islands to help with keeping the pond clean. And then also more of a butterfly habitat garden as well. And again, here at Daley Park along College Avenue is where you used to have some parking. That parking got closed off due to the railroad that's adjacent to the park. And so it was just asphalt. And so they kind of really looked at what they wanted, what they imagined it would be and what they might want to use it for. This is another one where it complemented a city project where the city was already putting in a new ramada. So certainly a grant might not cover a brand new ramada. And you can see in the picture where they're playing bocce that there is a new ramada there, but their grant could cover trees. It could cover, they have a bocce area there. So really those grants were used to kind of enhance and add to what the city was doing, and in that way could really, and then that was also a joint application where they were able to put more funds. So again, we want to make sure we leave a lot of time for questions, but just want to go through the process in case it's your first time. But before you're submitting your grant application, you're talking to staff. Today's workshop is a great start. Again, make sure you go on the website, review all the materials. Never too early to start talking to your neighbors, brainstorming about projects, kind of figuring out what it is that you guys want to apply for. Again, as Dave mentioned, you're going to want to reach out directly to him if you are going to pursue a park project. He's going to want to make sure that he meets with you, that it's going to fit in with the park. And then again, we're refining the projects. Dave, did you want to add anything to that before we go to the next before?
No, I think that's good.
And so again, it can take a process. Some of you, go ahead. Dave, are you adding?
No.
Okay, sorry. So again, you're going to want to continue to meet with your neighbors. Some of you may kind of just meet and decide right away, that's it. Other times you might have to do a little bit of research. Maybe you have a neighbor that's passionate about one thing, divvy up the work, have them maybe go out and get bids or explore things, and other neighbors do something else. Dave talked about this, but depending on the project type, sometimes it's a city vendor, so your bid will come from Dave letting you know how much the vendor costs. Other times it might require some kind of additional design, some additional bids, but that's where Dave will let you know what that is and what that looks like. And again, it ends up being depending on what you want to put in. So we can't tell you right away until we know what you're thinking about. And then the grant application deadline is the end of April. We are always happy to review any grant applications, but we can't do that if you turn them in on the day they're due. So anytime you want us to look at it in the process, if you kind of have a draft ready in April and want us to take a look at it, we're happy to do that. And then the deadline is a hard deadline in April. And then, not to throw too much information at you, but the purpose of kind of the after is just to let you know, because you're approved doesn't mean like the next day we go out and start building the project. There might be other requirements. For example, if you're doing shade, you might require lighting under it. Some of that stuff requires additional permits, additional approval. So sometimes if, they're doing something else in the park, it might be coordinated with that. So some of that after will be worked on with you if you're successful in getting funding. So again, the timeline, start now talking, figuring out kind of some of that information and the deadline there. And then, as I said, the grants are July to June. So the awards made in the summer, and then those projects have to be completed by June. Again, we do have other projects you can apply for. We talked about those workshops were recorded as well and will be available on our website. So you can go back and watch the presentations on those and follow up with any questions to the staff there. And that's the website again, tempe.gov/neighborhood grants. And then you'll always have the direct contact information. So Dave won't try to hide. He gives you his email, his phone number. And so you can reach out directly to him to ask those questions and get comments. And so with that, really, we want to make sure and open it up for questions. Brenda has started some of the chat there. If you have a question and want to type it out, we can take them there. Or if you want to raise your hand, that function is also available. And then Brenda will call on you and you can ask your question that way as well.
Yeah, I don't see any raised hands right now. It looks like a question is coming in via chat. Just a moment. Nope, there are no via chat and no raised hands. Let me see.
So with the chat, Brenda Daly's email. And so if you don't have any direct questions for us, you know how to get a hold of us. So please do reach out.
Let's give it just one more minute just to make sure there's a little bit of lag here on the participants. So, Hannah, just a moment. Sorry, almost there. To be having a little bit of technical lag on my end. So Hannah, if you possibly could type in your question into the chat until I can see if we can get you unmuted.
Oh, hi. I think I'm unmuted.
Oh, excellent.
My question is, do you? Sorry, I'm hearing myself. My question is, do you have to live? To request to do a project in that park, or does your association have to be within a certain distance?
That question would probably be best. Shauna, you could probably address that question. Do you have to live in the park to do a project in the park?
Yeah. Brenda, do you mind muting yourself? I think you're having an echo. Thank you. Sorry, Hannah. Yeah. So thanks for the question. So you should have some tie to the park, where the point of the grants is that if you're applying as a neighborhood, it doesn't benefit your neighborhood. So you're only eligible as an association. But certainly we do have associations that may fill their neighborhood park. You don't have to be directly adjacent, but it should in some way feed into where that neighborhood goes. So depending on where you live, that might cover a couple parks. But you would just have to show as an association that you all agree to that park improvement. And then depending on what it is, and that's why Dave talks about the level of park, we might talk to those directly adjacent. Just as an example, in Clark Park, when they put something in, it was adjacent to homes. So if you were an association that didn't live right there, we might go, and then they didn't know about it, we just might give them a heads up and see, hey, are there any concerns? This backs up to your house. If it's something new that wasn't there before. So we would work with you, but as long as there's some tie to the community, it's fine.
Great, thank you.
And were there any other questions?
We don't have any other hands up in the chat.
Okay, so we thank you guys all for joining us. Again, you have Dave's direct email, or reach out to myself or anyone else in Neighborhood Services, and we're happy to help you fill out the grant application and get you on your way to improving any parks or any other projects you want to work on. So thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.